Hi guys, let's talk about 5 blunders which President William Ruto has made and actually are having impact in our economy. The president has opportunity to fix these blunders because we all know we've been having issues in the country where there have been corroded faith in the government we have, and of course Kenyans out here are actually communicating to the president with regards to what he's supposed to do to ensure the country is running appropriately. And most of these things are borderline openness when it comes to sharing information and also enhancing accountability is what we're going to be talking about in this video. You are all much welcomed to the Money Daily TV. My name is Afagza Sifuna. Having said that, the very first blunder which I think President William Ruto made was upon him taking over government when he was elected. He didn't fully disclose to the country and even so do it himself or ensure it is appropriately publicized with regards to what the situation was and even so which debts he had kind of like inherited. Of course, there are some different news articles out there of different people saying different things with regards to how the then government had caused bankrupt situation. But guys, we didn't see the president coming out clearly to put that picture in shape. And I personally think had he done that, it could have really assisted set expectations of Kenyans with regards to his campaign manifesto or promises versus the reality and even so the time he needed to be able to action or implement what he had promised to Kenyans. Okay? And then the second thing, which I think our president has blundered on, is consistently not being on top of the game when it comes to accounting for borrowings. We've seen, for example, Kenyans pushing out their questions with regards to, hey, we are borrowing this amount of money, it is for what purpose? Hey, we are having conversations, for example, with the World Bank, with the IMF. What is this conversation about? And even so, how are we going to see these resources which have been borrowed utilized in the country? Of course, we all appreciate we have competent cabinet secretaries, or even so competent cabinet secretaries are to be hired to these offices to do what they've been hired to do. But I think sometimes it is important just to set the picture clear. It could be the president himself or even so a person he's delegated to who is holding the relevant office to explain to Kenyans when there exist such questions. And it is unfortunate because we have actually seen in the past even Kenyans taking a step further to even communicate with external entities with regards to them being uncomfortable due to continuous borrowing, and yet there is a perception that they are not sure how these funds are utilized. Of course, there are procedures out there around this kind of flow of money even to the very tail end, whether it's the report of the Auditor General. But I think just to enhance accountability, the president could have taken upon himself to be notifying the country about such situations on maybe a regular cadence. Talk about, for example, quarterly, biannually, you name it. That would really have assisted enhance the faith of Kenyans in the government, and most importantly, also ensured any lack of information is bridged in the best way possible. Okay? And then the third area where I think the president has also not really stepped it a notch higher to ensure he fixes all the ends is when it comes to accountability by all within the government and any government agency out there. What do I mean? What I mean is that we've seen some delays in accountability, okay? We've seen, for example, something happens and then we have our president react to a given situation as opposed to him or even through his influence ensuring that everyone in government is accountable. If there's something that's amiss, any person who is suspected to have driven anything which is amiss in government need to ensure they pave way to ensure there is appropriate room for investigation, and even so, in case any is held culpable, then they need to actually be answerable according to the law. And I'm saying so because we've seen some moments whereby there's been delay in those, for example, who have done different things being taken action of. But now, I think if the president could, for example, be ensuring there's total accountability, we could be seeing a different scenario where Kenyans will really be upbeat about the government and its seriousness when it comes to fighting corruption and even so ensuring accountability by all who are in those positions of power, whether it is the executive, whether it is the national service units, for example, the police, you name it, okay? And then guys, the fourth area where I think the president has actually not really performed extremely well on is when it comes to also him sometimes double speaking, or even so people within the government double speaking. And just to give you relevant examples, for example, when you talk about things like, for example, donations in churches, okay? At the height of the Gen Z protest, we saw the president saying that is something that needs to stop. But of course, months in, we saw again the politician dancing to the same music, right? I think, guys, we need to have a situation where, in case the president has decided something, he needs to stick to it to the latter, because he knows that he decided something in the first place, and even so, he is addressing grievances of Kenyans. Another example, guys, we saw, for example, when the president disbanded his entire cabinet, Kenyans were really upbeat, thinking that actually things were about to change for the better because the president had really stepped up the game, only to return almost the entire cabinet back to office. And of course, that left Kenyans with some form of disappointment, because they asked questions. Why in the first place was the cabinet disbanded if the president knew that, for example, he'd return everybody back in office, or majority of them back to office? It was kind of confusing, and I think these are some of the areas where the president could tighten the rope to ensure that once he says something, he sticks to it, and be sure Kenyans will really be more upbeat about the decisiveness of the government, and even so having the interest of Kenyans at heart. And then the fifth area where I think the president has kind of like slept partly on his job, and even so when it comes to reading the room, is him ensuring there's more frequent public participation forums where the government explains to Kenyans what it has done, and of course being very objective. I'm not talking about those explanations, for example, which happened during those political rallies, okay, where we see concrete issues being mixed with politics, and even so politicians taking a stab at each other. I personally think, had the president, for example, had a standing baraza which is televised, and even so has his ministers come together to answer relevant questions which Kenyans have, it would have really assisted, ensure there is closeness with regards to Kenyans understanding what the government is doing, appreciating, and even so in case of any challenges, they could be discussed. Kenyans would give their own opinion, and even so the executive would listen and include in the governance. I think, guys, this is an area where the president could actually improve. And of course, we've seen in different countries out there, Rwanda, a few other countries, whereby these barazas are taken seriously, and even so pertinent questions are asked to those in authority, and they do answer to the citizens any questions they have. They shed clarity, they ensure there's clear vision on where the government is going, and any government projects or focus items are clearly communicated to the citizens. Guys, I think those are some of the 5 areas where the president hasn't really stepped to upwards of 100% or even close to 100%, and I think he has room to rectify these areas so that there is increased faith from the Kenyans when it comes to appreciating the government, and even so feel like the government is fully working for them and they are working together to build our country. What do you all think? Share your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let's continue discussing. Cheers, guys.